Your tie is so tacky. Your wife has poor taste in ties.
I wore the tie my wife gave me to attend the alumni reunion. My classmate made fun of my tie, but he soon regretted it. You're in trouble.
Huh? What?
My name is Sam Howard. I'm 31 years old and work for a clothing company. I learned how to make clothes when I entered high school. I learned hard every day with the goal of becoming a designer in the future. Thanks to my efforts, I was able to join a clothing-related company after graduation. I lived my life working hard with the dream of starting my own clothing brand someday. Honestly, and hard works pay off eventually. Dreams can always come true. I was pursuing such naive thoughts while dedicating myself to my work. But this industry was not that simple.
No, this won't do. Our company is looking for innovative designs that stand out from the rest. Your work is too ordinary. There's no spark. Even a grade schooler could easily draw such a design.
Those words were the harsh truth I heard when I first came to this company. The designer at our company, who saw my sketches, was a famous designer even within our company. We often worked together, and our relationship was good. I knew his straightforward and no-nonsense personality would lead to tough opinions, but I still wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to know how my designs would be evaluated by someone with exceptional skills. That is all about me. In this world, only a handful of designers can make it big. The vast majority either work on clothing production while employed by a company or give up on their dreams and work for other companies. I realized how tough this industry was after joining the company. I was one of the many who joined the company, and I worked hard to become a top designer, but an ordinary person cannot compete with a genius, and I gave up on my dream. Now, I am involved in the production work that brings to life the creations of those geniuses.
Sam, I'm thinking of working on this collar part next, but I'm a little worried that this sewing method won't do justice to the embroidery here.
Indeed, let's try changing it to a felling stitch and finishing a prototype. I'll explain to the higher-ups on my end. Being able to work in the industry I had admired was a good thing, but lately, I felt a bit regretful. Did I really aim to become a designer with such a light-hearted attitude, giving up on the dream I had worked so hard for? Every day, I kept asking myself these questions. I didn't expect my work to be accepted, but I continued to design clothes as a hobby, hoping that someday I could create the clothes I loved. A turning point came in my life when I received an invitation to a middle school reunion from a friend. Honestly, I hesitated momentarily about whether to go, but meeting old friends and sharing a drink with them might help clear my troubled mind. With that in mind, I decided to attend the reunion. However, I couldn't imagine that my life would change so dramatically because of this reunion. When I attended the reunion, I was delighted to see familiar faces. The reunion with old friends after such a long time was filled with endless conversations as we caught up with each other. Some of them even brought their children along to the event. Everyone seemed to be enjoying their lives, and I watched over them with a sense of relief.
Wow, it's Sam. You're still wearing tacky clothes as usual.
The person I had been worried about attending the reunion had come to disrupt the enjoyable atmosphere of the party. by making fun of me from behind. His name is Mark Sanders. His family owned a long-established boutique, and Mark was the only son. He currently worked for a major clothing company and was in charge of the design department there. He had always had a strong sense of fashion, earning him the nickname Fashion King in our class. It was a nickname given to him for his arrogance and great sense of style. He knew that he was being called by that nickname, but it seemed that he didn't care whether it was meant sarcastically or not. He even promoted that title himself. For someone so full of confidence like him, such sarcasm was not a big deal for him. I had heard that he had entered the same industry as me. I was certain that he would target me and make fun of me at the reunion. That's why I had been hesitating to attend. And sure enough, my premonition came true. I couldn't help but let out a deep sigh at his condescending attitude. "You are still talkative as always. It's been a while since you spoke, and that's what you say." He had always stood out for his lack of common sense, and even as an adult, he found amusement in his insolence. I couldn't help but pity him at this point. Mark and I had a history of rivalry since my school days. It seems that this grudge started because the girl he had a crush on at the time had feelings for me, but I had nothing to do with it. But I didn't care about such things. It was just annoying that someone else's infatuation with me caused trouble. When Mark learned that I was pursuing a career as a designer, he seemed to take it as a challenge to show the difference between an ordinary person and a genius on the path of a designer. Now, he had risen to the status of a popular fashion designer to the extent that the fashion industry in the States paid attention to him. Even at this reunion, Mark, the popular guy, was always surrounded by women and asked for autographs. When he came over to me, he was surrounded by several women and had a proud look on his face.
What's wrong? Huh? Jealousy from a guy with a lower income than me? You just look even more pathetic.
He was as obnoxious as ever, and it made me feel sick. I wondered what was good about him with such a terrible personality, despite his apparent talent. It seemed that even the women around him were disgusted by his attitude, as it showed on their faces. Several of my friends teased me, saying that it's written all over your face, and I realized how fed up I was with the situation. Despite his terrible personality, it seemed that the women around him were only interested in his money, and there was no sign that they cared about anything else. I couldn't help but mutter in my mind about these money-hungry people while waiting for the storm to pass. But then, my friends who were dining at another table extended a helping hand and beckoned me over. "Sorry, but I don't want to waste my time talking to you. See ya." With those words, I left Mark and his entourage, prompting a chorus of boos from the women who were with him. I noticed people whispering and muttering negative comments about me under their breath on the edge of my field of vision. However, I paid no attention to such things and headed towards my friends. Regardless of the insults or mean-spiritedness, dealing with Mark was the worst. It was still better to be talked about behind my back. With these thoughts in mind, as I approached my friends who had extended a helping hand, they expressed their concern. They pointed out Mark's obsession with me. His hostile attitude was so intense that people around us were also talking about it. I expressed my gratitude to my friends for helping me, and we enjoyed drinks together again. But time passed quickly. As the first round of the gathering ended, the organizer was confirming the attendees for the second round. During a break, while taking a smoke in the smoking area, my buddy Tom from junior high school approached me.
It was a disaster, dealing with Mark like that.
Yay, seriously. I've always wondered why he's had it out for me.
He's jealous of your talent, probably. He's been conscious of you for a long time, one way or another.
Huh? He's the one overflowing with talent. I'm just an ordinary worker.
People around you just haven't realized it yet. Your greatness.
While uttering these cryptic words, Tom lit a cigarette. At that time, I couldn't understand the meaning what he said. When I tried to delve deeper into what he meant, Tom suddenly looked surprised as he stared at my tie.
Have you changed your fashion sense or something?
Huh? While I was puzzled, he took my tie in his hand and examined it closely.
You didn't used to wear something like this, didn't you?
You really pay close attention to people? Huh? Actually, this is.
What's with that tacky tie? Your taste has certainly changed.
I was about to answer Tom's question. Mark suddenly appeared out of nowhere and started making fun of my tie. I wondered why he had come out of nowhere and was getting annoyed with him. Then Tom intervened to protect me.
Hey, what's your deal? Just showing up out of nowhere.
Tom was over 6 feet tall, and his imposing presence was quite intimidating. Mark, feeling like a deer in headlight, shrunk back. However, he had his pride in front of the entourage that had come with him. He couldn't afford to lose, so he quickly retorted. Looking up at Tom,
What's wrong with calling something tacky when it's tacky? I was just expressing my opinion.
Why do you even need to say something like that?
I'm just trying to help you out. People without talent and taste will always be out of touch with fashion. Fixing your tacky sense is a good thing, you know. You're just garbage at the bottom, no matter what you do.
Mark grinned at me while letting out a crude laughter, looking directly at me. Tom, looking utterly shocked and doubting Mark's sincerity, took a step closer to me, distancing himself from Mark, and expressed contempt for him. Tom probably didn't want to deal with Mark any further either. He extinguished his cigarette in the ashtray he held and left some words with a mocking smile behind.
If this tie looks bad to you, you're just a mediocre guy.
What do you mean?
Mark showed a puzzled expression at Tom's cryptic remark. Ignoring him, Tom turned to me and signaled that he was going back to the others.
I need to talk to those guys for a bit. You should go back to instead of dealing with this idiot.
Tom had only told me that because he must have known that I didn't want to be harassed by Mark and left me behind and returned to the group of friends, leaving only me, Mark, and his entourage at the scene. There were a few people passing through the lobby, but no one paid any attention to us. I didn't want to spend any more awkward time here. Thinking that, I quickly extinguished my cigarette and was about to return to the venue to catch up with Tom. However, Mark noticed my actions and started to provoke my emotions with an inappropriate comment.
You can't even express your own opinion. Ho, you're as weak-willed as ever. That's why you can't create decent designs.
As I heard those words, unpleasant memories from junior high school came flooding back to my mind. Back then, I had dreamed to join a company of the brand I loved and someday sell clothes I designed. I wanted to succeed as a designer and make life easier for my hard-working parents. They often argued over money in our not-so-wealthy household. Even as a child, I wanted to help in any way I could, so I diligently practiced drawing and came up with design ideas every day. I did this even during school breaks, and one day, Mark happened to see my drawings. Mark had an exceptional sense of aesthetics, was highly regarded by everyone for his skills, and everyone praised him as a genius. It was because of him that I became self-conscious about my drawings, which he saw and ridiculed. This drama resurfaced in my mind due to Mark's words, and I began to feel more uncomfortable.
You're such a hopeless loser. Just by wearing such an unimpressive tie. It's pretty obvious, though.
As he tried to touch my tie, I swatted his hand away and quickly distanced myself from him. Mark, with a clearly sour mood, stared at me with a suspicious expression, as if wondering why I had reacted that way, and tried to close the distance between us. However, I didn't waver in the face of his glare, and I firmly held onto my tie, putting an end to his taunting words. This is something precious that someone special made for me. You have no right to say anything about it. When he heard those words, Mark seemed momentarily surprised by my reaction, but then he quickly wore a knowing smile, deliberately provoking my emotions.
I see. That explains why it's so tacky.
Did you say that again?
You didn't marry a designer's wife, right? I heard it through the grapevine.
He probably deduced that the person I mentioned as someone precious was my wife. Despite his earlier indifference, Mark began to show a clear attitude change as he realized that this was my weak point. He continued with his words.
Anyway, she is probably just pretending to be a designer at some small to medium company, right? Your designs are mediocre, the colors don't match the suits, and most importantly, this tie doesn't suit you at all.
Mark's entourage in the background laughed while making fun of me and my tie. And then, he got carried away and uttered words that he should never have said, hurting something dear to me.
Your tie is so tacky. Just like your wife's sense of style too. Both of you have fatally bad taste. In a way, you two make a perfect couple.
He said, trying to provoke a reaction from me. He wore a smug expression as if he were anticipating my response. His entourage watched with amusement, clearly expecting an interesting turn of events. However, I paid no attention to them. Instead, noticing someone behind them, I placed my hand on my forehead and let out a sigh. You're in big trouble.
What?
His smile fading as he glared at me, clearly baffled by my words. I pointed my finger towards the person behind him, as if trying to convey the meaning of my words to him. Mark noticed this and slowly turned around to check the meaning of my words. It was at that moment his gaze shifted to the back that something happened.
Sierra Nolan.
There, standing before us, was none other than the world-famous designer, Sierra Nolan. She was a prominent figure in the fashion industry in Paris and rarely made public appearances. However, due to her occasional media exposure, anyone in the industry knew about this globally renowned celebrity. Beside her stood Tom, who had been with me earlier, and they both approached with a pleasant smile.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Mark. I've heard quite a bit about you from my husband.
Sierra said with a refreshing smile, gradually closing the distance between us. Mark, clearly perplexed by the situation and not understanding what was happening, stammered,
About me?
Yes. How you've been making fun of my husband since your school days.
Sierra, with her towering height, easily exceeding 6 feet thanks to her heels, loomed over Mark, who shrank back in intimidation.
I'm sorry for leaving you alone.
Then, quietly approaching me from behind Sierra, Tom apologized for inadvertently abandoning me.
Sierra had been in touch with me. She told me that if you were attending the middle school reunion, you should contact her if anything happened. She said she would come to pick you up immediately.
In truth, he worked in the same fashion industry as Sierra, just like me, and had some professional connections with her. Knowing that Tom had been a friend with me, Sierra remembered that I had previously mentioned Mark and decided to inform him, just to be sure. Understanding the reason for Sierra's arrival, I observed the situation, contemplating how to handle it.
What? That's just absurd.
Just what, exactly? You've been speaking as if you suddenly developed a keen sense of fashion when it comes to the tie I had him wear.
Sierra interrupted, peering into Mark's face, and he realized that his wrongdoings had been exposed, including the fact that he had been eavesdropping on our conversation. Most importantly, he understood that this situation was extremely unfavorable for him and staggered backward, trembling.
No, it's just that.
Are you suggesting that my design tie is tacky? Maybe your eyes aren't quite right?
Upon hearing those words, Mark looked surprised as he lifted his trembling face, alternating between gazing at me and Sierra. Just as she had mentioned, this custom-made tie was a gift from Sierra to celebrate something, and the entire suit itself was a present from her. Sierra had put immense effort into every detail of this suit, thinking of me, and Mark had ignorantly ridiculed it without knowing it was crafted by the globally renowned designer herself. Mocking a globally renowned designer's work with the tone of someone who just learned about it was nothing short of embarrassing. There's nothing more embarrassing than ignorance itself. It was as if he was exposing his own ignorance. Seeing Mark in this state, his entourage began to distance themselves from him, visibly disconcerted and casting disapproving glances. Faced with the reality of the situation, Mark couldn't find any words to utter and could only open and close his mouth like a goldfish, unable to articulate anything.
I do not know how remarkable of a designer you are, but I won't tolerate you belittling the things and people I hold dear. Thinking you're inferior to the man I admire? Please, stop making such misunderstandings. I'll be more than happy to introduce you to the person you've been belittling.
As she spoke, Sierra pulled out a document, and to our surprise, it contained the handwritten signature of a famous Hollywood star. When Mark saw this, he looked at me with confusion, and I too was visibly shaken.
This document is a commitment from an actor who saw Sam's designs and wants to collaborate with him. Even a famous celebrity like him was impressed by his unique designs. Do you understand? You couldn't create something like this.
Upon hearing Sierra's words, Mark seemed to think it was a lie as he took the document from her and began reading its contents. Ignoring his reaction, Sierra turned to me and gave me a gentle smile and said, "Congratulations."
It's time for your hard work to be recognized.
Could it be the design offering mentioned there?
Yes, that's right. I showed him some of the designs you've been sending me tirelessly, even when you were working abroad.
I had been sending my designs to Sierra for advice while she was actively working overseas. Despite her greater success in the field, Sierra consistently praised my designs, and her words as my common-law wife were the greatest source of encouragement for me.
Never give up because the time for your recognition will surely come. Keep creating your designs. I promise to make your dreams come true.
It was because of her words that I never completely gave up on being a designer.
His fashion designs have a unique sense that can be felt. He wasn't the only one who supported his work. My colleagues in the industry are also eager to work with him in Paris. They've even created openings for him.
Sierra said, wrapping her arm around mine with a dreamy expression, proudly mentioning it to Mark. To succeed as a designer in the fashion capital of Paris meant possessing an aesthetic sense recognized by everyone. For Mark, who understood the significance of this, there couldn't have been a more humiliating situation. Somewhere along the way, he had become envious of me, a designer who had surpassed him and had desperately tried to undermine me.
That's just a coincidence, right? Besides, those sketches might not even be your work. You probably had her do them and then pitch them. There's no proof that any of the designs you claim to have created are yours.
Mark resorted to baseless accusations, even leaving his entourage visibly disgusted. His resentful words, full of jealousy, had Sierra and everyone else at a loss for words. They were utterly dumbfounded by his malicious pettiness. Seeing Sierra's reaction, I sighed and turned to Mark, delivering the final blow with my words. If it's about the sketches, they're still on my PC, and if you want, we can even call him right now to confirm. The chances of him colluding with us without knowing the circumstances are low. If he acknowledges the contents of that contract, wouldn't that be solid evidence? I said, flashing my phone as Mark seemed to be at a loss for words, or perhaps too flustered to respond. He must have realized that he had no comeback to that. He hung his head, seemingly defeated. You've always looked down on me and acted so arrogantly, which is probably why you never grew as a person. Your talent was undeniable. I may have disliked you, but I recognized your abilities through the work you created. That's why it's such a shame. If you had a better personality, perhaps we could have interacted differently. Upon hearing those words, Mark seemed to finally grasp the extent of his mistakes and collapsed to the floor, tears flowing without any attempt to hide them. Thanks to Sierra, I managed to get back at Mark and left this country with a clear and cheerful mind. The suit she had given me was intended as a surprise gift, and she had kept the story about the contract a secret, planning to reveal it once we arrived in Paris. I had no idea what the celebration was about, though it was mentioned that it was a celebratory gift, and it wasn't until after that alumni reunion that I was informed of the truth. And suddenly everything fell into place, leaving me with a feeling of clarity and relief. After that, I got a job as a designer at a major fashion brand in Paris, which Sierra runs. Colleagues who used to ridicule me in my previous company were left grimacing when they found out about this. As for Mark, He had become a laughing stock in front of our former classmates, and his dignity had been stripped away, and it turned out that a colleague from the same company had attended the reunion and spread the story as gossip. He was living with a tarnished reputation at the company with his new nickname, Personality Disaster, and no one felt any sympathy for him. Sierra and I, on the other hand, were featured in Parisian magazines as a famous designer couple. Despite her initial reluctance to step into the spotlight, Sierra, who had a tall stature, now balanced her roles as a model and designer. She had a change of heart and expressed her desire to design clothes for herself, eventually endorsing her in the modeling world. Somehow, she turned out to be a good fit for it, and now she manages both modeling and her business, working together hand in hand with me. Grateful for the opportunity to work in my dream job alongside the person I love, we continue to pour our hearts into our work.